Hey there, and welcome to another special episode of Alan's Music Room. Today I'm going to be counting down my 15 favorite Kiss solo albums. Any album recorded by a member of Kiss outside of Kiss. Now, I know that my list is going to be a lot different than probably what you would pick, so I would really love to see you comment and tell me what your ranking would be. Which is your favorite, which is your least favorite. I would love to see that. So drop that in the comments and let's get rolling. All right, coming in at number 15, we're going to start it out all the way back in 1980. This is the second solo album. It's actually the first solo album after leaving Kiss. This is Out of Control by Peter Criss. And I was really kind of struggling with which Peter Criss album to pick to put into this. None of his stuff is really stuff that I tend to gravitate towards, so it was kind of, slim pickings. So I really went with Out of Control basically on the strength of the title song. I love the song a lot. I think it's the strongest thing on the album. There's another song called My Life, which is not too bad. And another highlight is a cover of the Young Rascals song You Better Run, which is a pretty decent version. Interestingly, Peter's album came out 1 month after Pat Benatar's second album, Crimes of Passion, which also included a cover of You Better Run, which of course became a big hit for Pat and was, as you know, the second video ever played on MTV. So that's number 15, Peter Criss, Out of Control, an okay album. Number 14 might be a little contentious with some folks. Vinnie Vincent Invasion, the first album, 1986. I really love Vinnie as a member of Kiss. I think he's a great guitar player and a really strong songwriter. So musically, and as far as song structure goes and stuff, I really love the Vinnie Vincent Invasion albums. The thing that I don't really dig are the vocals. I'm not a big fan of either Robert Fleischman on the first album or Mark Slaughter on the second album. They're just a little too high-pitched, and Mark Slaughter gets a little screechy for me. So I went with the first album, partly because there are a couple of really good songs on. I mean, there's a lot of great songs on there, but I really sort of lean toward No Substitute and Back in the Streets, mainly because Robert is singing a little lower in his register and it's not quite as, piercing. There's also a song called Invasion, which is amazing, especially the verses. It's got a really strong verse structure, and I just think it's fantastic. It's the best track on the album. So that's number 14, the first Vinnie Vincent Invasion album. Now, another Kiss guitarist spinoff that I really do like is White Tiger, and that's number 13. It's from 1986 as well. And the main difference, there's a couple of main differences. One, Mark is a really great guitarist that has more of a classical feel. So his songwriting is a little bit different, but also David Donato, the vocalist, has got a really different quality of voice. And some of the stuff that he does on the album sort of reminds me a little bit of like David Coverdale and almost even a Ronnie James Dio in quality. It tends to be a little bit more operatic, especially on songs like Rock Warriors, Runaway, Northern Wind. So I think that Vinnie Vincent Invasion and White Tiger sort of run neck and neck, but I think that the difference in vocalist puts White Tiger one step ahead. So that's my number 13 pick. Now, number 12 is the second album by a band called Union, and that was a spinoff project that Bruce Kulick and John Corabi did. The album came out in 2000. It's Blue Room. It's such a good album. There's a couple of great songs on there. Do Your Own Thing is fantastic. That's the opening track, and it's just so good and so catchy. There's one called Dead and another one called Everything's All Right that are just really strong songs. And of course, that from his playing in Kiss. that Bruce brings some really amazing guitar playing and songwriting to the album. He's such a great riff guitarist and just comes up with such strong material. So this may seem a little low on the list, but that's okay. We've got more Bruce coming up. So that was number 12, Blue Room from Union. At number 11, we have Asshole from 2004. That's the second solo album by Gene Simmons. A lot like his first solo album from 1978, stylistically, Asshole is just all over the place. You've got some really hard and heavy material balanced out with some really acoustic, folky, kind of things like in the vein of Mr. Make Believe from his first solo album. There's some of the really heavy songs are like Sweet and Dirty Love is fantastic. His cover of the Prodigy song Firestarter is fantastic. A song called Carnival of Souls, which is really good. And then he also has some new songs that he wrote based on unfinished works by Dylan and Zappa, which are really cool. And the Zappa song, Black Tongue, has got members of Frank Zappa's family singing backup. So it's really endorsed by the family, and he licensed the use of the song from the family. So it's all on the up and up. But it's a great album. I don't think it's as strong as his 1978 solo album, but it's really good. And the heavy stuff is really heavy, and it's just amazing. So that brings us to number 10. And this is kind of a weird pick. This is Ace Frehley. It's from 2016. It's called Origins Volume 1. Now, normally I'm not a big fan of covers albums. Like most every band has done one album of all covers, and for various reasons. Either, they're come to a point in their career where they're not as strong in songwriting, or they're trying to fulfill a contract or whatever. And I've just never been a big fan of it. But I got to say that this album is so good. He really brings in a lot of guest artists, mainly as vocalists, and I just think that lends such a great element to it. And the highlight for me, not just because Paul sings it, but because it just sounds so good, is Fire and Water, which is a cover by the band Free. Paul sings it a little lower in his register, which really suits the way his voice is sounding these days. And I just think it's so incredibly strong. But Ace does covers of songs by Cream, The Stones, Hendrix, Thin Lizzy, all kinds of things. He also does 3 Kiss covers, which I think are really interesting. One of them in particular is a song that he was credited on, but never actually played on. And that's Rock and Roll Hell from Creatures of the Night. I thought that was such an interesting inclusion for this album. So Ace is really going back to his roots and picking stuff that influenced him, and even, picking some things from his previous band. And I think it's just an incredibly strong album. And the only reason that it's this low on the list is because it's pretty much just an album of covers. Otherwise, it's such a strong album that it should be a little higher, maybe, especially when you see my number 9 pick. So number 9 is from 1978. So yes, it's one of the big original 4, and it's Peter Criss's first album. It's a lot like we were talking about on Out of Control. Stylistically, it's not really as strong for me, but I think that overall the material is really good. And he does a lot with sort of like these slow piano-y, acoustic-y kind of ballads. And I think that they're just terrific on this album. So the opening track, I'm Gonna Love You, is a good song. And then there's a couple of other, things that are along the way that are good. But 3 of the ballads that he does, Easy Thing, Kiss the Girl Goodbye, and Don't You Let Me Down, I think are just fantastic songs. And he sings them really, really well. So that's my number 9, Peter Criss from 1978. So number 8 was our next Bruce Kulick entry. And that's his first solo album, Audio Dog, from 2001. Man, this is a great album. It's so strong. Some of the highlights are he does a sort of a good mix of instrumentals and songs that he sings. And the instrumentals are just great. The opening track, Paradise, there's song called Sky Dome, which is fantastic. And also there's one that's sort of a tribute to the Japanese kaiju movies that I absolutely love, Monster Island. So those three songs, all instrumentals, are really, really great. Another one of my favorites is Change is Coming. I don't want to diss Bruce in any way because I love him. I think he's amazing and such an incredible talent. The vocals aren't necessarily his strongest suit. So we're going to see what he does with that on our next entry. But overall, I think that Audio Dog is just a fantastic way to, come running out of the gate for your first solo album. At number 7, going up to 2006, we have Live to Win by Paul Stanley. Definitely not as strong as his 1978 album, but it's a good album. It's a solid album. The title track is fantastic. There's a couple of other highlights that I really dig. Bulletproof is probably my favorite song on the album. Lift is great. But I got to say, the best thing that came out of this was his solo tour, where he played all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't really expect him to play, like Magic Touch and Million to One. And he pulled a lot of stuff off of his 1978 solo album. And the band was really strong, and his voice was sounding kind of rough, but it was still strong. So he sounded great. And it's such an incredible show. So if you haven't ever bought it, look for it. It's just terrific. So Live to Win, 2006, good solid album, coming in at number 7. At number 6, we have, again, 1978, and it's Gene Simmons. Like we were talking about earlier with Asshole, this is a really experimental and really diverse album. It's stylistically, it's just going everywhere it can go. There are a couple of forgettable tracks. I'm looking at you, Tunnel of Love. But there are some really strong songs like Radioactive, which of course Kiss played on the Dynasty tour. I love that song a lot. See You Tonight, an acoustic-y kind of thing, which is really great. And a couple of things that are a little bit more cinematic. Always Near You, Nowhere to Hide is probably my favorite song on the album. It's just amazing. And Man of a Thousand Faces is fantastic. But there's a lot of other stuff that's really notable on here as well, like Burning Up with Fever. First of all, is a great song, but then you have that really weird and dissonant acoustic intro to it that kind of doesn't make any sense at all and doesn't seem to connect to the song at all. But it just sort of hangs there. But it's just so cool that he intentionally did this really dissonant thing that sort of resolves into this really pretty thing that goes into this, uproar song. So I'm a big fan of this album. I think it catches some heat from fans, but I really dig it. So that's Gene Simmons coming in at number 6. So number 5, I've got sort of a twofer because I think you have to have both of these things together to make one sort of complete picture. And that is my boy Eric Carr with Rockology, which was released in 1999, and Unfinished Business, which was released in 2011. So this is stuff that the family put together, releasing some demos and a couple of finished tracks that Eric had done. And I just think there's so much great material on here that should have been on Kiss albums in some cases and weren't ever included. My favorite Eric song, I think, is Eyes of Love, which originally got released on Rockology. It's such a great song. It's so strong. His vocals are great on it. There's a couple of other songs on the album on Rockology that are just superb. Somebody's Waiting is such a killer song. And then there's one that's sort of unfinished called Nightmare, which I really would love to hear somebody do a finished recording of. And that kind of brings us to Unfinished Business, which is a very different album. It's sort of a continuation of Rockology in that it's a collection of some demos and early recordings, but it's also kind of a tribute album where other bands have recorded new versions of Eric's songs, like All Hell's Breaking Loose. There's a new version of that on there. Um, One of the cool things on there is you hear Eric's, when Eric was auditioning for the band, he just took a recording of Shandy. He recorded his own vocals over the record. And so that's included as a brand new song. So there's a new musical arrangement of the song with Eric's original vocals, and it's really cool. There's also a new recording of Eyes of Love. This one, a little bit heavier guitar. It's a different vocal take than what we hear on Rockology. And the drums are by John Humphrey of Seether. So it's a really big, strong, powerful track. So those two Eric Carr albums are my number 5 pick. So number 4 is the first Fraley's Comet album from 1987. Man, I love this album. I remember the day that I bought it. I mean, I was working at a record store at the time it came out, so it was easy for me to get, the first one out of the box. That one's going to be mine. But I remember putting it on and listening to it for the first time and hearing Rock Soldiers, and that just blew me away. And I was like, this is going to be such a killer album. So another highlight on that is, speaking of Eric Carr, the song Breakout, which was based on a song that Ace and Eric were working on back during the Elder days. And it never got used, never got finished. So Ace finished it and put it on the Fraley's Comet album, and it's just phenomenal. Just one of the greatest Ace Frehley songs and greatest Eric Carr songs ever. I really liked the first single, Into the Night. I thought that was really great. But some other ones, Something Moved, which is a Todd Howarth song, which I was really glad to see involved. But even stuff like Love Me Right was fantastic. Stranger in a Strange Land is so good. Just a great, great, great song. And then the closing instrumental, Fractured 2, which was a continuation of the thought process from his first solo album with Fractured Mirror. It's just such a great song. And, there's like some silly songs like Dolls, but I still like it. It's still great. So number 4 is Fraley's Comet. Just a strong song. And, equally strong to me is the second Fraley's Comet album, Second Sighting. And the only reason that I didn't include it on my list is because it's really only half an Ace Frehley album, and the other half is Todd Howarth songs. Now, I really dig Todd Howarth, and I think his songs are great. And in fact, on the second album, I think the Todd Howarth songs are my favorite songs, except for a couple of exceptions. So that's why I didn't include it on the list. But Fraley's Comet, the first one, is definitely my number 4 pick. It's so great. So that brings us to number 3. And we have some more Bruce Kulick. And this is from 2010. This is BK3, his the last solo album that he's done so far. And man, is this a powerful, powerful album. Holy cow, it is so great. I mean, every song on this album is fantastic. So, I was saying that I don't think that Bruce's strong suit is his vocals. So he doesn't sing every song on this. He does some, and the songs that he sings lead on are ones that are really, really well suited to his voice. Like the first song, Fate, it is almost kind of like a spoken word song. And it's just a fantastic song that he really, really does well. And then there's another one later on in the song on the album called And I Know, which Bruce sings. And it's a much more melodic, much more pop kind of song, but he wrote really well for his voice, and just one of my favorite songs on the album. Some other highlights are Ain't Gonna Die, which he and Gene co-wrote, and Gene sings. Fantastic. No Friend of Mine, which sees a return of John Corabi. He comes in as a guest vocalist for that song. It's fantastic. There's Dirty Girl, which is sung by Doug Fieger of the Knack. And I tell you, this song sounds like it's a lost Knack song. It's like Bruce wrote this specifically for Doug, and Doug just sounds fantastic on it. But the highlight, the absolute strongest thing on this album is Hand of the King, which Bruce wrote with Nick Simmons. And man, this song is built on one of those classic, really strong, really heavy Bruce Kulick licks. I mean, it's just incredible. And the lyrics written by Nick are just fantastic and full of like really dark, really sort of fantasy-ish imagery. And man, it just blows my mind. That album came out really early in 2010. And Kiss's Sonic Boom and Ace's Anomaly came out right at the end of 2009. And I saw Bruce, I'd kind of corresponded with Bruce a little bit about another project that I was working on, which I'll talk about in a different video. But I got to meet him in person at a Kiss convention that was here in Atlanta that year, not too long after BK3 came out. And I had the chance to ask him, with a Kiss album and an Ace album and his album all coming out right within, a couple of months of each other, if he thought that that helped or hindered each one of them. Was that saturating the market, or did each one of them sort of reinforce the other ones? And he said that was a great question, first of all, but he also said that, yeah, he thought that it really lent an extra, like a sort of a helping hand to each one of those three projects. It raised the profile of all of them, because each one of them got press, and each one of them sort of like fed back into the other ones. And so he was really glad that the timing worked out the way that it did. And I thought that was a pretty cool answer. So BK3, if you've not heard it, it is like the best Kiss album that Kiss didn't do. I mean, it just is an incredible piece of work. So Bruce, great album. Okay, so number 2 and number 1, because I just couldn't decide in which order to go with these, because they're both incredible. And that, of course, from 1978 is Ace Frehley and Paul Stanley. And one day I might pick one of them as the top, and the other, it just kind of flip-flops. But both are just incredibly strong albums. Ace, really, I mean, he'd done some songwriting for Kiss, Cold Gin and Parasite and Strange Ways and things like that. And then Love Gun rolls around, and you've got Shock Me, which was a song that Ace wrote and sang. And I think from that point on, his confidence grew and his profile in the band grew. And 1978, his first solo album, just kicked down the doors. I mean, just an incredible album, and some really sort of unexpected and sort of experimental songwriting, like in Ozone and things like that. It's just a killer album. Every track is perfect. Every track fits Ace. It fits the tone of the album. It really establishes him as a force to be reckoned with, and one to not be underestimated anymore. And man, I mean, you just cannot say anything negative about Ace's first album. But likewise, Paul's album is so good. This is like, it's sort of like a Kiss album, but it's sort of like not, it's Kiss, but a little bit more grown up. It's a little bit more sophisticated. It's a little bit more well thought out. This is Paul really putting a lot of effort into sculpting an album, really crafting something. And I think it's just an incredible record. And it's telling that when you get up to 2006 and he does his solo tour and he's touring on Live to Win, he does as many, if not more, songs from the first solo album as he does from his most recent record, Live to Win. Because every song on here is just terrific. Well, okay, Hold Me, Touch Me, that might not be my favorite song. It's a little schmaltzy. So I guess on the strength of Hold Me, Touch Me, I will put Paul at number 2 and Ace at number 1. So there you go. That's my official final ranking. So I know that you probably disagree with this because, Kiss fans are going to disagree, and that's okay. Put your list down in the comments. I really want to see how your picks differ from mine. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this.